To start off talking about Scotland's overall health, we're going to go ahead and look at their diet. Scotland's diet has remained persistent through the past 15 years and is persistently poor throughout all socioeconomic statuses. We can assume these habits are created in their youth, being that 65% of school-aged children have reported to being overweight. These habits carry on to adulthood, with only 20% of people in Scotland consuming the recommended portion of fruits and vegetables. In fact, the Scottish Diet reports that people have the highest rates of cakes and pastries and meats and total fats. For alcohol use, in comparison to England, Scottish men are twice as likely to die from alcoholism, and Scottish women suffer 87% higher alcohol-related deaths. Having a poor diet has resulted in Scotland having high percentage rates in these diseases: obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. In 2014, 28% of adults reported to being obese and 64% were overweight. And over 150,000 people were diagnosed with diabetes. And 5% of all adults reported to having heart disease. Cancer is one of the leading causes of death in Scotland, being 2 in 5 people have been diagnosed with cancer at some point in their lives. The graphic on the right is showing the average Scottish diet compared to a regular healthy diet.
Diet psychoanalysis. Cultural influences. Obesity. Parental factors are thought to play a major part of the obesity population, especially for children. Alcohol use. For the past 2 decades, Scotland has had a steady increase in alcohol consumption, which is associated with a growing number of health and social problems. However, drinking is recognized as an important role in the Scottish culture. Scotland's gloomy weather is a factor to alcohol dependency. Historically, alcohol was used as a coping for the country's ruthless climate. Psychological effects. The obvious physical effects of improper diet control, health problems, behavioral changes, and more. The psychological effects of obesity can include depression, impaired body image, and/or low self-esteem, eating disorders, stress, and poor quality of life. Psychology terms and association. Depression, a mental health disorder characterized by consistent depressed mood or loss of interest in activities. Studies have proven that depression can likewise be lethal, cause further health problems such as heart disease, asthma, and clogged arteries. Both heart disease and depression can occur when the chronic stress triggers blood vessel inflammation. Depression can worsen and inflammation stays consistent or increase. Stress is how people perceive and respond to certain events, stressors that we perceive as threatening or challenging. Alcohol effects. Excessive drinking can cause physical and psychological damage. Alcohol is a depressant. Physical damage from alcoholism can include shrinking of the brain, premature death, and organ damage. Psychological effects can include depression, memory loss, impaired reactions. Psychology terms and association. Depression, a mental health disorder characterized by consistent depressed mood or loss of interest in activities. Depressants are drugs such as alcohol that calm neural activity and slow body functions. Alcohol use disorder, known as alcoholism, is marked by intolerance, withdrawal, and a drive to continue consumption of alcohol.
Diet solutions for Scotland. For obesity, the Food Standards Agency believes that Scotland's citizens need to cut their sugary food intake in half and decrease intake of sugary drinks. Also, the food environment needs to change to help its citizens choose a healthier diet that has less sugar and more fruits and veggies. The government, social media, and the food and drink industry play a big role in shaping the food environment. For the industry, you can see a lot of commercials like Lay's chips, Pepsi, Coca-Cola promoting unhealthy foods. Some steps manufacturers have taken to improve the food environment is salt reduction. You have the option of getting lightly salted potato chips now, and package labeling on the front of products so that consumers can see how much sugar and fat are in the products and decide to get a healthier alternative. The Food Standard Agency also recommends cutting back on alcoholic drinks as they are high in calories and contribute to weight gain. To combat childhood obesity and to teach young children healthy eating, the Scotland government has introduced the Eat Well plate, which includes the main 5 food groups. In 2008, Scotland set nutritional requirements for all school lunches. This includes nutrient standards and food and drink standards. Parents should encourage their kids to eat healthier by making their own diet healthier. By addressing obesity at a young age, children will have less likely of a chance of getting heart disease and diabetes when they get older. To combat Scotland's excessive drinking problem, the government has supported alcohol and drug services even through the COVID-19 pandemic and has invested money into many different programs that combat alcoholism. A report from the National Health Service of Scotland states that there has been a 3% decrease in the volume of pure alcohol sold per adult in Scotland.
Drug use. Scotland has the highest drug death rate in Europe. There are said to be about 60,000 problem drug users in Scotland with a population of 5.4 million people. This leads to a variety of health and social problems. There were more than 70,000 drug deaths in the US in 2017 with a rate of 217 per million. That is now marginally lower than Scotland's rate, which is 218 per million. They take things like a lethal cocktail of drugs that often combine opiates such as heroin and methadone with benzodiazepines. These pills are known as street Valium or street blues. Heroin was one of the main things men were using but are now taking new street pills, often containing a substance called etazolime, which is stronger than prescription. According to the graphs, Scotland has more drug deaths per capita than any European country. You can also tell that in 2018, over 1,000 drug-related deaths occurred.
Scotland's drug psychology analysis. From a cultural standpoint, the country of Scotland views drug abuse as a mental health problem rather than a crime. They are known to have the worst drug crisis in Europe. Most drug abusers come from the deeply deprived areas in Scotland, and this leads to an increasing rate of drug use due to limited to no access of aid and treatment. Coming from hopeless and poverty-flooded areas, this makes total sense because many Scottish residents view drugs and alcohol as their only hope. One day, a Scottish man by the name of Colin Hepburn was interviewed over the topics of Scotland's drug crisis. Hepburn grew up in one of the most deprived areas of Scotland. He states that he senses no hope and no sense of purpose living in his impoverished community. He says that he had no choice but to cope with his problems by abusing drugs. Scotland's push for a change of action. In 2018, the Scottish government published an article called Rights, Respect and Recovery as a plan to decrease the alarming rate of drug use in Scotland. Their delivery involved a main focus of prevention to greatly reduce the chances of drug and alcohol abuse, learning to take actions to get rid of the health differentials, and a strong urge to encourage residents to become involved in tackling this huge effort.
Scotland Drug Solutions. Up until 2017, Scotland had a drug strategy in place called the Road to Recovery, which was 10 years old. It had some success but couldn't prevent or reduce drug-related deaths or harms. In 2017, the Scottish Drugs Forum proposed a refresh of the Road to Recovery strategy. In the response, A Drugs Strategy for Scotland, they describe a new drugs strategy that meets the challenge in Scotland. In their prevention strategy, they want to focus on and reduce the main reasons people use drugs, such as inequalities and poverty. They also want to increase the opportunities for all people and keep a focus on young people and vulnerable children. The SDF believes that the drug strategy for Scotland should recognize that drug use later in life could be a result in children who had a neglectful and abusive childhood. With this in mind, they want to make the government responsible for preventing childhood neglect and abuse, as well as supporting children and adults who have gone through this in their past. The way they want the government to go about doing this is developing better mental health services for anyone, as well as training and development of the workforce to help work with people who have had experiences such as these, get a job, and be able to work. Scotland Drug Solutions continue. The SDF wants to ensure that drug education is being applied so that people are equipped with the knowledge and skill about them. They particularly want young people to be educated about drugs, so they have the knowledge about them before they are given the opportunity to partake in them. After preventing drug use, they have several other things they want to do to ensure that the drug problem in Scotland is reduced. These other procedures in their plan include reducing harms, opioid replacement therapy, or ORT, better quality of specialist treatment and care services, recovery, criminal justice, policying the law and drug use, drug legislation, changing cultures and attitudes, future-proofing a drug strategy for Scotland, and making sure it works.
Mental health statistics and information for Scotland. Mental illness is one of the major health challenges in Scotland. It is estimated that more than 1 in 3 people are affected by a mental health problem each year. The most common illnesses are depression and anxiety. Only about 1 to 2% of the population have a psychotic disorder. Depression is prominent, and about 1 in 8 people take medication for it. Poverty could be a factor in these mental health issues. The number of people being treated for mental health issues is rising. This does not appear to be the more people have mental illnesses, but because people are accessing treatment as understanding grows and the stigma of mental illnesses reduces. Although the number of suicides have peaked between 1992 and 2002, but have been falling since then, which is very good news.
So, a mental health psychoanalysis of Scotland, or rather, how is mental health viewed in Scotland? So like most nations, mental health was viewed as a bit of a taboo subject until very recently. In Scotland, that has a lot of historical factors coming into it, but one of the main reasons for that is that family units are extremely important traditionally in Scottish culture, and mental problems have historically been seen as like shameful to the family. You know, if there's something wrong with a family member mentally, it's shameful to everyone involved. And also, optimism is a very valued trait in Scottish culture. They're a very optimistic, forward-looking people, generally speaking, of course. And pessimism and depression are not generally socially acceptable in Scottish culture and mainstream Scottish society. And so people that suffer from those as a mental problem tend to be either overlooked or have it downplayed to kind of save face, if you will. Alright, so to continue the mental health psychoanalysis of Scotland, you need to look at the influences on the Scottish national psyche as a whole. So one of the largest things that have historically impacted the Scottish as a people, at least as far as their psyche goes in this case, is that following the Act of Union, which is when Scotland and England became a unified kingdom, the Kingdom of Great Britain, historically the Scottish in that union were abused by the mostly English population of Britain, and it created a kind of a national Scottish feeling of being sidelined and abused. So despite the optimistic, forward-looking approach that the Scottish traditionally take, they also tended to view themselves as victims, and a victim complex can often lead to some mental problems like, say, depression or anxiety, in some regards at least. And then also, Scotland is traditionally a very religious nation, and both the Catholic Church and the Protestant churches and their teachings have long had a strong impact on the Scottish people, and obviously a heavy religious tone to your national identity is going to have a heavy influence on your people psychologically speaking. And which I will say, as far as the Act of Union and Catholicism go, it plays into the fact that the Scottish are historically a very ferociously nationalistic people. They have a very strong nationalistic mindset, and this has influenced mental and social problems to be seen as kind of a kind of problematic to the greater Scottish identity, and so you'd rather not want to be seen as a mental, not to insult people, but you wouldn't want to be seen as a mental handicap to the greater Scottish society because you weren't really doing your part to represent that great Scottish, I guess, like national face, if you will.
Some of Scotland's government solutions are as follow. Test and develop effectual digital tool for young people affected by eating disorders. Fund more services that focus on treating child and teen mental health issues. Provide more support to improve psychological therapy services and set up treatment goals. Create more available psychological self-help resources and support introduction of computerized CBT with National Health Service of Scotland by 2018. And support the physical activity program created by Scotland Association of Mental Health. Breathing Space is a confidential space where Scotland's citizens can call or text about their depressing or anxious thoughts or feelings, and even get information about how to deal with these mental health issues. Scotland Associations for Mental Health offers information about mental health and how to deal with mental issues. It also provides and promotes programs like United to Prevent Suicide, a suicide prevention program, and Britain Get Talking, a TV campaign to encourage citizens to look after their mental health. Also, Scotland's government and media front should help destigmatize mental health issues and encourage its citizens to look for signs of depression or other mental illnesses and learn how to offer support to those in need.